Hello everyone, we are group 3 of Orbit Thursday class and these are my group members. Today we're gonna talk about a fundamental topic of organizational behavior which is attitude and job satisfactions. Before we begin, let's think about this. We all have heard that it is important to find a job that fits us, right? So what exactly is a job that fits us? Some may say that it will be a job that our ability is qualified. But how about some other aspect, such as a place where you want to stay, a job that you feel like you are contributing yourself, a place where you enjoy good pay and high security? Well, more than a job that's suitable for your ability only, a job that fits you is more of a job that satisfies you. Well, as general as the term satisfying job may sound, the component of it is actually more complex. To know more about what actually creates job satisfactions, we need to look into some of the factors of it, such as attitude and behavior, as well as other related aspects. Now, you should keep in mind a few questions as you go along to this video. What is attitude and how is it related to behavior? What are some factors of job attitude? Some reason behind job satisfactions? How would job satisfactions and dissatisfactions would affect the organizational effectiveness? And finally, how can you start applying this theory to yourself as employee or as manager? Hopefully after this video, you will understand and be able to apply effectively this theory to know more about how to improve your own job and properly define which one is the right job for you. And also as a manager, you would know what actually suits your subordinates to bring out the most in them and enhancing their satisfactions and commitment in their job. Now without further ado, let's us jump into the first part.
So now, let's come to the very first part of the chapter, attitudes and the three components of attitude. To begin with, attitudes are defined as judgments or statements that evaluate objects, people, or events. They reflect our feelings about something, either favorable or unfavorable. A simple example of one's attitude towards their job can be like, I like my job. However, attitudes are more complex than they appear. To fully understand attitudes, let's have a look at their fundamental components. Attitudes are assumed to be composed of three properties, namely cognition, affect, and behavior. Among which, cognitive components refers to our opinion about or the belief in the way things are. For example, my pay is low. It's a realization, a thought that I have about the pay I receive. Then comes the affective component, which involves our emotions or feelings about the situation. So when we cognitively believe that our pay is low, aren't we likely to have feelings about that? Consequently, our affective expression can be reflected in a statement such as, I am angry over how little I'm paid. Affects can then lead to behavioral outcomes, or the intention to behave in a certain way towards someone or something, as in, I'm going to look for another job that pays better. Now that I have gained an overview of the components of attitudes, we can move closer to understand their complexity and the potential relationship between attitudes and behavior, which begins with our cognition setting the stage for the affective components, leading to behavioral outcomes. Let's look at an illustration of this relationship. In Exhibit 3.1, an employee didn't get a promotion he thought he deserved, so his attitude went as follows. Cognitively, the employee believed that he was supposed to be promoted. Concerning the affective aspect, he strongly dislikes his supervisor. Thus, he expressed dissatisfaction and started complaining, indicating his behavioral response to his supervisor's decision to not grant him the promotion. In reality, these components are hardly separated sequentially. What we can rely on is the fact that attitudes are important and closely related to organizational behavior. That is why we should try to understand how these attitudes are formed, what impacts they may have on job behavior, and how they might be changed.
Now that we know basically about the relationship between attitudes and behavior, let's take a deeper understanding about it. We tend to assume that people behave according to their attitudes. However, social psychologists have found that attitudes and actual behavior are not always perfectly aligned. For example, plenty of people support a particular candidate or a political party, and yet they fail to go out and vote. People are more likely to behave according to their attitudes under certain conditions, such as when your attitudes are the result of your personal experience, or when you are expert on a subject, or when you expect a favorable outcome, or when the attitudes are repeatedly expressed, or when you stand to win or lose something due to the issues. However, in some cases, people may alter their attitudes to better align them with their behavior. For instance, imagine the following situation. You are running a business, and you've always placed a high value on financial security. But one day, you start working with someone who is very financially unstable. So, in order to reduce the tension caused by the conflicting belief and behavior, what will you do? You will have two options. The first one, you can end the relationship and seek out another partner who is more financially skilled. And second one, you can de-emphasize fiscal stability importance. So, in order to minimize the dissonance between your conflicting attitude and behavior, you either have to change your attitude or change your actions. Such cases of attitude following behavior illustrate the effects of cognitive dissonance. The term cognitive dissonance used to describe the feelings of discomfort that result when your belief run counter to your behavior and new information that's presented to you. People tend to seek consistency among their attitude and between their attitude and behavior. So, when what you hold to is challenged, or what you do doesn't fit what you think, something must change to eliminate or to reduce the dissonance or the lack of agreement. A classic example of this is explaining something away. Psychologist Leon Festinger suggested that people have an inner need to be ensured that their belief and their behavior are consistent. Inconsistent or conflicting belief leads to disharmony, which people try to avoid. However, no individuals can avoid dissonance. For example, you know that sleeping late is harmful, but you do it anyway and hope nothing bad happens to you. In his book, A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance, Festinger explained cognitive dissonance can be seen as an antecedent condition which leads to activity oriented toward dissonance reduction, just as hunger leads toward activity toward hunger reduction, like eating food. The desire to reduce dissonance depends on three factors, including the importance of the element creating dissonance, the degree of influence we believe we have over the elements, and the rewards of dissonance. For instance, you believe exercise is important for your health, but you rarely make time for physical activity, so you may experience the cognitive dissonance. This resulting discomfort may lead you to seek relief by increasing the amount of exercise you get each week. In this instance, altering your behavior to increase consistency with your belief and reduce the cognitive dissonance you are experiencing can play a positive role in your life and your health. The most powerful moderators of the attitude relationship are the importance of the attitude, its correspondence to behavior, its accessibility, the existence of social pressure, and whether a person has direct experience with the attitude. Important attitudes reflect our fundamental values, self-interest, or identification with individuals or groups we value. These attitudes tend to show a strong relationship to our behavior. Hence, if the match between attitudes and behavior becomes closer, the relationship becomes stronger. For example, specific attitudes can predict specific behavior, and general attitudes can predict general behavior. In addition, the more frequently expressed an attitude, the better predictor it is. However, dissonance between attitudes and behavior may occur when social pressure to behave in certain ways hold exceptional power, as in most organizations. And finally, attitudes based on direct personal experience are stronger predictors.
Now that we have known quite a bit about attitude in general, I would also want to talk about attitude, but specifically in the workplace. And there are three most important attitudes that exist in a working organization, which is job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and employee engagement. And now we're gonna look into details about each of them one by one, and we're gonna start with job satisfaction. Now, job satisfaction is not just whether or not you like your job, but it's more a positive feeling of you toward your job, and this is resulting from an evolution of the job characteristic. The second item in this job satisfaction category is job involvement, and this is defined as a psychological identification of one person to a particular job. So it's a little difficult to understand it by the definition, isn't it? So you can just understand it by thinking is your way of define yourself, your way of linking yourself to a specific job. For example, a very proud scientist would want everyone to know about his job, so he's gonna go around and tell everyone that I'm a scientist. So he identified himself to a job, a scientist, so that's his job involvement. And the last, but definitely not least, is psychological empowerment. And this is a belief of an employee over their influence over the job and the competence in the job, and the job meaningfulness and autonomy. So this is really important because very often during the working process, managers just hand out rules and regulation, and those regulations usually associate with their own feeling and thinking, but rather than associate with the people who work for them. So if this happen regularly, the employee will fail to find the meaning of the work, and they can find their influence over the job. So this will negatively affect the satisfaction of an employee. And the second job attitude, which is also very important, is organizational commitment. Many research have actually shown that organizational commitment can actually predict job performance. This is pretty easy to understand because most of the time, employee with high organizational commitment would commit more and work harder for the organization that they are working for. And this relationship between hardworking employee and organizational commitment is especially strong for new worker, because usually newcomer would always want to prove themselves to the organization that just accept them. So they would perform much better, even better than those who have organizational commitment but have stayed for a while. Organizational commitment is defined as a person identify his or herself with a particular organization. And this is a little different from job involvement, which is a person identify themselves to a specific job. For example, our professor, who is very motivated and energetic about being a teacher, so he wants everyone to identify him as a teacher. So that is job involvement. But if he's not just proud to be a teacher, but he also really proud to be working at IU, International University, so he would tell everyone that I'm a teacher at International University. So if he's doing that, he is identifying himself to an organization, which is in this case IU, and that's his organizational commitment. So if you really like the organization that you're working for and you are tuned to a goal, you're likely to have organizational commitment. But there are not only one, but there are three dimensions that includes in the organizational commitment, which is affective commitment, normative commitment, and continuance commitment. First, affective commitment, which is a personal positive feeling or an attachment that you might have towards an organization. And it's likely that the higher the affective commitment, the better the employee would perform in their work. And another desirable state, which involve a sense of loyalty, is normative commitment. And this is a feeling of obligation to work. This is a degree that an employee stay at an organization out of a sense of obligation. And this obligation is not from their employer, but rather from their moral duty and the value system of an individual. And finally, continuance commitment. And this is an employee's personal perceived cost of leaving or staying with the organization. However, organizational commitment nowadays is much less important than in the past, perhaps because workers these days are more likely to have occupational commitment, which is the loyalty to their profession rather than to a specific employer. You can see that younger workers tend to switch between different position or even different organization rather than staying at one organization because they want to gain more experience rather than dedicate all of them to an employer like those older employees at our parent age. And now I want to demonstrate some of the example of the three major dimensions in organizational commitment. We start with affective commitment, and this is the commitment that make employee want to work really hard for the organization and sometimes even bring other talented employees to this organization. And the second is normative commitment. This can be demonstrated by a situation that actually happening right now. So during this epidemic, many companies suffer many difficulty. So the employee also have to suffer pay cut or defer pay or late salary But instead of leaving, they choose to stay with the organization because they don't want to leave their organization during the bad time. And the example for continuous commitment could be demonstrated by a person who is not really enjoy working in the organization that they are currently working. However, they stay because if they leave the organization, they might not be able to afford their own living. And we come to perceive organizational support, or POS for short. And this is a degree to which an employee believes that the organization actually care about their well-being and value their contribution. And POS is gonna be high when the employee actually sense the perception of fairness, or they get involved in the decision making, or when the manager is actually helpful and supportive. And POS is gonna be a major driver of whether or not you're gonna have the organizational commitment. And finally, employee engagement. So this happens when the supervisor is really supportive rather than directive. The employee would have a chance to be involved in the decision-making process. So when that happens, the employee might surprise you with their ingenuity and employer engagement. So rather than just handing out ethics and rules, the manager should say something like, hey, we have to do this. Do you have any idea how we can solve this? Or do you have any idea that we can make this better? Or how can we do to improve this? So in this case, the manager actually work with the employee and give them the objective and let them find their own way to meet those objectives, rather than just show them the way. And when the employees are engaged, they are more likely to be thriving at work, and they would love their work and they can't wait to do more. Engaged employees are usually really passionate about their job, and it's work the opposite way too. If they're not engaged, it's likely that they won't be passionate about their work. And although researchers working hard to distinguish between different work attitude, there is a high degrees of overlap between those different job attitude. So if a worker have high job satisfaction, they tend to be more engaged and they would show a stronger commitment to the organization.
The previous part has already mentioned about the definition of job satisfaction, and this is what we are particularly interested in OB. So how can we pass on without digging deeper into it? I would like to begin with a guess. Do you know which jobs are the most unsatisfying ones in the world? I'm pretty sure that most of you will come up with very low-paid jobs. To check whether it's true, let's take a look at Exhibit 3.2. Well, the results are astonishing. Among the worst ones are broadcasters and firefighters, very well-paid, very wealthy jobs. So, if not based on pay level, how can we measure and rank job satisfaction? Now there are two most popular ways to evaluate how one is satisfied with their job. The first method is called the single global rating, which simply requires takers to respond to this one question. All things considered, how satisfied are you with your job? Based on the scale of 1 to 5, with 1 representing highly satisfied and 5 for highly dissatisfied. The other method is the more complicated, the summation of job phases. It identifies key elements in a job like the type of work, present pay, promotion opportunities, relationship with co-workers, the skill needed. Respondents will rate these on a standardized scale, and the researcher will add the ratings up
to create an overall job satisfaction score. You may rush into the conclusion that the latter, the second option, the more complex is the better, right? But in fact, surprisingly, they are equally valid. This is a rare example of when simplicity just works as well as complexity. Both of the methods have their own strengths and weaknesses. When you want a method that is time-saving and just as effective, go for the single global rating. Meanwhile, if you want to zoom in on certain problems and tackle them, the other method, the summation of job phases, is certainly preferred. Next, let's look at job satisfaction from a broader perspective. How does job satisfaction vary? Some significant pickouts are variance by economic situation, by culture, and by job phases. Firstly, economic stagnation can be a cause for a fall in job satisfaction. With an evidence of the US in 2010, the peak of economic depression when only 47.7% of their workers claim that they are satisfied with their jobs. What a terrible figure, right? And yes, culture is a big player in deciding job satisfaction. Same title, but it's much different in different countries. Mexico topped the chart of ranking by country, but that may not mean job conditions there are the most superior. It just simply means that Mexican people are less critical, more contented, more easygoing with what they are having. At the end of the day, job satisfaction are about the positive feelings you have towards your job characteristics, right? In sharp contrast, South Korea presented with the lowest score among all. This low score can be attributed to the low autonomy and the rigid hierarchical characteristics typical of South Korean culture. Last but not least, job satisfaction varies by job phases. Research by Westover found that the work itself and the supervisors are more satisfying to people than the pay and the promotion. Interesting, people want good boss more than they want money. Do you feel the same?
So what causes job satisfaction? Have a look back at the job you've ever had. Can you tell what made it great? The reasons can differ greatly, yet most of them are likely to range from job conditions, personality, pay, to corporate social responsibility. Starting with job conditions, including especially the intrinsic nature of the work itself, social interactions, and supervisions. They are important predictors of job satisfaction. Let me explain in detail each component of job conditions. While the intrinsic nature of the work itself can include the availability of training, variety, independence, and control, social interactions such as interdependence, feedback, social support, and interaction with coworkers outside the workplace are strongly related to job satisfaction. The last factor, supervision, refers to the manager's effectiveness, responsiveness, support, and empowerment. As important as job conditions are to job satisfaction, people who have positive core self-evaluation, in other words, positive belief in the inner worth of themselves and basic competence, are more satisfied with their jobs than people with negative CSEs. This is also the case concerning job commitment. People who highly commit to their career and have positive CSE may realize high job satisfaction. You've probably noticed that pay comes up often when people discuss job satisfaction. Pay does correlate with job satisfaction and overall happiness for many people, but the effect can be smaller once an individual reaches a standard level of comfortable living. Take a look at Exhibit 3.5. It shows the relationship between the average pay for a job and the average level of job satisfaction. As you can see, there isn't much relationship there. Money does motivate people, but what motivates us is not necessarily the same as what makes us happy. Would you be as happy to work for an organization with a stated social welfare mission as one without? Let's talk a little bit about CSR, or corporate social responsibility. An organization's commitment to its self-regulated actions to benefit society or the environment beyond what is required by law. Organizations practice CSR in a number of ways, including environmental sustainability initiatives, nonprofit work, and charitable giving. Employees, especially millennials, whose personal values fit with the organization's CSR mission, are often more satisfied. CSR allows workers to serve a higher purpose or contribute to a mission. However, an organization's CSR efforts must be well governed and its initiatives must be sustainable for long-term job satisfaction benefits. Not all projects are equally meaningful for every person's job satisfaction, yet participation for all employees is sometimes expected. Some organizations require employees to contribute in a prescribed manner. People want CSR to be genuine and authentic. CSR measures can seem disconnected from the employee's actual work, providing no increase to job satisfaction. In sum, CSR is needed, positive, and trend of accountability and serving. It can also significantly contribute to increased employee job satisfaction when managed well.